Hey everyone, thanks for joining us and watching this video. So we are back with Bolt, who is our 3-year-old warm blood baby breaker. He is about day 10 into being free lunged in the round yard using the cooler lunge training system. And today we have attached the long reins for the first time. So we don't normally free lunge them for so long, but due to circumstances, I've been sick, and I also wanted Bolt's owner to spend some time with him, handling him as well, and plus the rain has slowed us down. So we'd normally only free lunge a couple of times, attach the side reins, do a session in the round yard, and then head out into the arena, because spending too much time in the round yard can come with its own set of problems. Now, as I said, Bolt is on the long reins for the very first time, so that's why you can see that he's resisting turning, because he's not exactly sure what I want him to do. So I'm asking him to do something and he's giving me a reaction, which initially was just resistance, and then he's like, oh well, I will just try this, and manage to turn. And so now we're gonna go back the other way, and you'll see, just always concentrating on keeping him moving forward, keeping things positive, and just moving him around the round yard. This will get much easier when we go into the arena, but I need to know before we go in the arena that I have some degree of control. So while the arena is fenced, it's a much larger area for me to be trying to communicate with Bolt, and I don't want to teach him that he can run away from me and literally get away with it. So I want to establish that I have some brakes, because we already know that I have the ability to send him forward. So I need to be able to stop him and turn him to some degree before we go into the larger area. Bolt is very good on voice commands. He knows his walk, trot and canter commands, which makes long reining him much easier. So he is still having a little buck going into the canter, but we're gonna try and deal with that a little bit more today, and start to reprimand it, utilizing the long reins and the voice, and voice commands. So it's not that he's actually being disobedient, it's just that I'm asking him to do something and he's giving me a reaction. So now I want to start to say, hey, like, it's good that you're giving me a reaction, but how about we just tone that down a little bit? So I'm doing that by commanding him with my voice and chastising him, and at the same time vibrating with my inside rein, because you'll see when he does kick up, he always swings his hindquarters to the inside. So it means I want to bring the front end around, so he can't just swing the hindquarters to the inside when he's kicking up. And I know I have said in other videos that you shouldn't be stepping back when you're long reining or lunging, but this is an exception to the rule, because I'm trying to keep myself placed so that I'm in line or just behind Bolt's shoulder, and also so that I can keep him at the end of my lines. Now it's a little bit more difficult to push him out away from me when we're in the round yard, so I do need to position myself accordingly to what he's doing. He is also, as I said, like, this is literally his first time on the long rein, so I need to adjust my behavior to try and accommodate this young horse, rather than saying, like, this is where you need to be out there. As time goes on, of course, I'm going to insist that he stays out on the circle, but at the moment he's young, he's unbalanced, he's not entirely sure what I want, and he's just trying to do the best that he can. That was a better transition. And that's quite a good canter going around. We're making some good progress with his balance and his connection. As I said, this is the shortest that we've had the side reins on the cooler lunge training system, because each time we've worked Bolt, we've slowly shortened them up, and then we shorten them up throughout the workout as well. But we have probably taken that a little bit more slowly than what we would normally, just due to circumstances. So while Bolt is sort of having a little kick up into the canter right now, he is improving with each transition, and then he will revert. And that's okay, because he is at least responding to my commands rather than just ignoring me. So he's actually quite a compliant, nice, simple horse to work with. And I am sure it's going to make a very pleasant horse under saddle. That rhythm is starting to improve. The connection's improving. Of course, we have to stop to go toe-toe. Let's just move that along. Now, unfortunately, I have had to voice over this video because I tested out using the ear pods and having the owner video, and that didn't work. So you're not getting the best running commentary of me actually working Bolt and doing commentary while I do it. So this is the next best thing. So you can see that rhythm starting to continuously improving. He's starting to drop his pole, but I do want him to be working in a more round and connected frame. So I am actually going to shorten those side reins up a little bit more in a minute. Once he halts. Now, halting has definitely been a challenge for us. He likes to walk through my steadying aid, so I just keep telling him to woo and vibrate my fingers on the long reins and just keep asking him. He then does want to come in and towards me, so I just steady him with my outside rein and ask him nicely to stay on the circle. You have to be careful about them coming in when you're on the long reins, because you don't want them to turn in and then end up like spinning around. They can get tangled, so it's actually easier if you can keep them a little bit more out on the circle. And so now I adjust the long reins so that they're actually running down between his front legs and attached to the girth underneath, so I can get him working in that rounder, deeper frame and connection. Now you need to remember, especially when you're dealing with a breaker, like you will see in other videos, I will drop the long reins on the ground. I've taught all of my horses to just wait. Well, Bolt hasn't learned to just wait yet. So keeping a hold of your long reins is paramount, and then making sure that the long rein between you and the horse does not touch the ground. So as you're moving towards them, creep your hands up the reins and shorten them as you go. And then you can keep a hold of both lines and then just move around the horse. So essentially you need to adjust your behavior to the horse that you're working with. If this was a older, more experienced horse, I could probably just drop the reins on the ground because they stand there and they wait for me. They've learnt to do this because that's what I've taught them to do. But Bolt, we need to take every precaution. This is, as I said, literally his first time on the long reins. So now that I've moved the side reins to down between his legs, I'm asking him to come that little bit rounder and deeper and start to drop that pole so he can lift his back up and work in more of a connected frame. The whole time I'm working with Bolt, I'm always asking him to soften that little bit more to the inside so that he's straight on that line that he's traveling on. So being that he's on a curved line, I want his body from pole to tail to be following that curved line, just as I'd want that under saddle. So the rounder and the more consistently round and the more consistently connected I can get Bolt working on the long reins, the easier it's going to be for us when we start to back him. So everything that's happening on the long reins will then transcend under saddle. So I want this process to be as smooth and simple as possible. So the stronger, the more balanced he is, working on the long reins, it makes him easier for us to ride. It also makes it easier for us to communicate with him. So doing all this work with him now, when we get him under saddle, we'll come back to the round yard and we can then simulate, once we've led him off under saddle, then we can simulate someone like being in the middle and simulate them lunging him, which makes it easier for us to get him to move forward, because obviously when he's never had a rider on his back, he doesn't understand that when we squeeze his sides with our legs, or give him a kick in the sides that we want him to go forward. So we want to open those lines of communication with him. So having a person standing in the middle and then simulating lunging him can help him understand that he's got to go forward. Then he starts to associate with that with the leg aids, and that's how it goes. So you'll see there, he's just wanting to turn in towards me. So I just steady him with my outside rein, and he's quite responsive to that. So you've got to be quick with your commands, because if I wasn't quick with my outside rein, then I could end up having a horse that's like done 3 spins around in front of me, and I've lost complete control of him and he's wrapped up in my long lines. And if that happens, quite literally, just drop them. There's nothing you can do. So if your horse has spun around a couple of times and you're still holding your long lines, best of luck. Let them go, and then wait for them to stand because they're stuck, and then you can untangle them. Well, that's looking like quite a good rhythm. He's starting to lift up through his back more and just starting to drop that pole. So when you're wanting to get them roundy, you have to be careful not to shorten the, whoops, there we go again. That was a very wild transition, and that's okay. I just told him off for that one and said no. I literally pulled him back and said no, let's do that again. So I was saying, when you're wanting them to come around, you have to be careful not to over shorten your side reins, because Bolt has this tendency to want to tuck his nose in and bring his pole up rather than dropping his pole. So I've made some adjustments to the side reins, but I'm now just like lots of little vibrates with my inside rein saying, hey, come on, come around us. So he has to learn what I want. It's also going to be more comfortable for him to be traveling in a rounder, more connected frame, and this is how we make a sounder horse long run. You'll see you're starting to see a little bit of a loop in the side reins there at times, which is good. That means he's starting to drop his pole, but because I'm starting to see that loop, I am now going to make just one more adjustment to shorten the side reins just a little bit more, so they're having a little bit more influence on how he's traveling. Now, you'll see that when I approach Bolt, he's quite comfortable with me approaching him, because I'm always quick to give him a pat as I'm moving around him. I want him to feel comfortable with me being able to go up to him. I don't want him to feel uneasy or worried that he's in trouble because I pulled it, like made him stop and I'm approaching him. That was a better turn. So I've just made that one more adjustment, because I also want to be careful that he doesn't learn to rely on the side reins and start to brace against them, which is why I'm continuously vibrating with my inside side rein as well and saying, hey, come softer. I'm looking for that relaxation through the jaw and looking for him to start mouthing that bit a little bit more and seeing some foam in his mouth. Oh, I'm much happier with that connection. I can see that he's starting to drop his pole. He's actually traveling a little bit more straight on that curved line, if that makes sense. So I'm starting to see him bending a little more on the circle. So the more round and connected Bolt is, and learning how to travel in that round connected frame before we get on him, the easier he is for us to ride when we back in. So this work that we're doing is absolutely paramount to his training and to his development. We don't want him to be feeling tired and sore and uncomfortable when we get on him. We want him to feel this is business as usual, and now he just has a rider on his back. That's a much better connection now. He's really starting to drop that pole at times and let go and utilize his back end. And that's even more ground cover in the trot now. It's got much more swing through the body. Oop, and he does have this habit of wanting to turn out and swing his hindquarters in, so you'll just have seen that little hesitation there. I've quick to stop that and to move my body so I stay in line with his shoulders or just behind his shoulder. So again, now that we've got the long reins on him, those little habits will just cease to exist because we've got more control over him. So you'll see my outside reins are often quite slack because it doesn't have a need to do anything right now. But when I need it, it's there. So if he wants to turn in towards me, for instance, that's when my outside rein's going to come more into play. Or if he leaps into canter or kicks up into canter, that's when I'm using my outside rein to steady him and say, hey, no, I need you to do a smooth transition to canter. So notice I'm always positioning myself so I can stay just behind, at or just behind that shoulder. Now I'm trying to turn Bolt and he just said no, so I've just sent him forward again, and then we'll go back and try that turn again. So a big thing about long reining is you have to be able to move on your feet. You cannot just be in the one position and be stationary, especially with a breaker. You'll see that I'm moving around quite a bit to align myself with Bolt rather than making him align with me. As time goes on and he becomes more experienced and more balanced, then I'll be able to be stiller and Bolt will be working out around me. But at the moment, I am putting in more effort to stay a certain distance away from him. So if he comes closer, I can shorten my reins or move back. And then I'll ask him to go up. But remember, he is a young, unbalanced, unbroken horse, so you have to accommodate that. Now that's the connection that we're looking for. You can see that pole has now dropped. You can see that middle muscle coming down through the neck, and there's much more swing through the trot. So that has taken, and you can see sweat between his back legs, which means he's using his back end more effectively. So that has taken the entire session for us to get there, but we have had all that build-up work in between. So from our first video to now, as I said, we've probably free lunged about 10 times, and each time we've slowly shortened those side reins by degrees. And then again, so each time we shorten the side reins, we then leave it at that length for the next session, and then we can shorten them a little bit more. And we probably have gone a little bit slower with this horse, and then we've just upped the ante a little bit more today and said, hey, let's get serious with this. We want you working on the bit. We want you working around. There, and you can start to see they're slacking those side reins now because he's dropping his pole and he's more relaxed in his frame. And he's not relying on those side reins for balance. So this is it for today's video. We're going to wind it down now. We're just going to warm him down and do a couple of laps in a more relaxed walk to warm him down. So this is utilizing the cooler lunge training system with your baby breaker. I utilize this system on all of my breakers in the last 8 years since I designed the system. So if you found this video helpful, please